the 20th Century Way was originally produced at Boston Court, over in, I think it's in Pasadena. I've seen a couple plays over there a few times, and something I love about the work produced there is that it's usually very heady. They're thinking plays, and they're also the language of the plays is usually very beautiful. I recently saw a play called Love in a Major Organ, and the writing was so beautiful in that it wasn't afraid to go on these long speeches because it wasn't afraid of the audience losing interest or anything. They took pride in beautiful language, and that's something that the 20th Century Way has. It has beautiful motifs and devices. For example, we usually laugh at ourselves with our own words. A word that we use is ethnically, moral ambiguity. We use it once in the play, and then we use it again to laugh at ourselves. I think our men are facing a moral ambiguity, and as I go through the play over and over, there's just so much complexity to it, and the actors are wonderful in terms of finding new ways to understand the play. And we wouldn't have had something to understand without Tom Jacobson, who is wonderful. It's a beautiful play.
Tom Jacobson is the playwright. I have not read any of his other plays, but this play is certainly, as you can probably imagine, a tough one to write, and he does it very effortlessly. The way that it's written, the transitions from character to character really work, and it's not just a character switch. There's usually some sort of implementation that's allowed once one character switch into another, whether it be two characters saying the same lines over each other, or some mentioning of something that's then mentioned again, a few lines later. Overall, I have a great respect for Tom Jacobson, the playwright, because of what he's been able to accomplish with taking on this great task and combining it all into a fluid play that's only two people yet establishing so many characters.
I appreciate this play. It's something I've certainly never encountered before in my experience. I've done a lot of theater, and that being said, I've usually run screaming from the room from absurdist theater, and this has aspects of that to it. And I'm actually really grateful. On my first read of the play, as I was preparing for the audition, I didn't make that connection because I might not have auditioned for it, because the fear factor of it, or the nonsensicalness of it, may have driven me away from it. So I'm glad that didn't really sink in. I appreciate that rather than just telling this historical story, he added a whole nother level of allowing this tour de force for two actors to add this whole other layer, because it is a whole nother layer of what is honest, what is truth, what is the facade, what is the mask, what is real, what is not real. It's really fascinating.
What I think is really interesting about playwright Tom Jacobson's work here is that he's able to bring something that could be as dry as a historical drama to life with a lot of theatricality and still keep the story very intact. We get the whole story of what happened in Long Beach, but it's so much more than that. It's about these actors. It's about these bigger themes of connection and acting and personal stakes. So I think that's why it's a masterful play and why I enjoyed his writing on this piece.
The importance of this play is enormous in terms of it being performed in Long Beach, considering it's a huge part of Long Beach history, especially the LGBT history. And also it's Pride Month, or was Pride Month. This is a part of Long Beach history and LGBT history that is virtually unknown. And it's important that we bring it up because we tend to repeat the past, and the acts of the 20th Century Way of these two officers entrapping gay men is still a very real part of LGBT history. In fact, it happened only a couple years ago in Long Beach. It's a very real thing. And the importance of it being performed for a Long Beach audience is so that they are aware and that they know that it's not all sunshine and daisies. It's beautiful here, but we have a pretty terrible past parts of it.
It's important because We all need to see our stories. Stories are universal and they are specific. We can see the universality in any specific story. That's why if it's a good story, we can see it. But we also need to see ourselves in the story. And a lot of times we don't see ourselves. I think it's important for LGBTQ people, especially because this is a large community here in Long Beach. And plus the added benefit of seeing what our ancestors went through here in Long Beach, how they were persecuted. Literally, these men, these actors who hired themselves to the Long Beach Playhouse, the Long Beach Police Department, they were doing it for the money. They were ruining people's lives to make money, and they didn't care about them. And they were getting $15 a bounty. And they were literally taking these people who just wanted to connect with other people and ruining their lives. And I think it's brave, and we see in the story, one of the people that they entrapped, doesn't stand for it. He fights for himself. And I think that's also an important message for us as gay people, that we can fight against this injustice. And we all know there are many, many disquieting and disheartening things happening right now. And we are backslipping into a world in which people of our community feel threatened. And we need to be shown that our history is important, and also that we can stand up to injustice.
Selecting different stories and hearing different people's voices and bringing that to the theater. There's a couple of points with that I really love. There's a TED Talk where the guy says, it's online on YouTube, where he talks about the importance of theater with democracy and why it's so important. That's number one. I'm not even going to try to articulate all of his points, but I look for it. It's a really good view. The other issue too is, you hear complaints a lot about, there's no new stories, and although aspects of this story have already been told before, this is a history, and some of it's shameful that society went to this place. Now, people can have moral values about choices that people were making, physically and sexually, and you can argue that point till you're blue in the face. That being said, in that time period, gay men weren't allowed to date and hold hands and work on and nurture relationships like heterosexuals were. So they were kind of like forced into a box of chasing some level of intimacy physically, and then were even forced further into doing it in clandestine places that were, that then society had issue of. So it's like this big hypocritical challenge for that era, which even still bleeds into today. So just as a roundabout answer back to that question, it's those who do not, learn history are doomed to repeat it.
The importance of the 20th Century Way, especially now, is that as a society, we have forgotten how to connect. And that sounds kind of backwards considering we have so many different ways to connect. We have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. But what we've forgotten is a certain empathy that comes with connecting with people. What we see in this play is a lack of empathy and a lack of character initially. And as we go through it, we see them develop feelings for one another. And not necessarily romantic, but they care. And what we lack today is the ability to care. It's very black and white. It's very, you're wrong, I'm right. We live in a very divisive time. And the importance of the 20th Century Way, especially now, is to show people what the consequences are of living in your own world and living in a very divisive mindset and living black and white. It doesn't work. That's why by the end, when they begin to open up and begin to feel empathy and understand and push each other towards understanding, that's when we truly see connection. That's important.
It's important for many reasons. The LGBT community, of course, but it's also important to show people as people. that people want to connect to each other regardless of their sex or their gender. And it's something very important to all of us, this connection. This whole story, the whole show itself is about people pretending not to be what they are and then trying to find connections in the pretense. And by the end of it, they realize they can't form a connection that way. They have to drop the pretense in order to be able to connect to each other. And I think what a lot of us today are doing is that we've put labels on ourselves, identities. I am this thing. I am this religion. I am this political affiliation. And they become masks. And it distances ourselves from each other, getting from this thing, this label, to what the personal is. And I think this play is also about the personal. And it's always strange when you have to think about having to deal with the political persona and then the personal persona. Because they're both important, but if we don't balance them, then our connection to others is lost, and we can't view them as people. And it's very easy to view people as ideologies as opposed to people.